The night is not empty. It has texture that fingertips can almost feel. By a ring of fire, embers float and vanish, and a child tilts a metal bowl to catch the sky. The bowl becomes a mirror. Stars slide across the water, cut to another mirror far above us. A cold telescope with shields opened like a silver flower. Light that left before our species learned to speak grazes invisible mass and bends into a ring that should not exist. The night answers questions, but not in our language. Every time we gather a brighter instrument, it replies with a deeper riddle. We are taught a simple chain. Every effect has a cause. Strike a match and flame appears. Pull a string and a bell rings. Yet when we turn our instruments to the oldest light, the chain behaves like a loop. We see a universe that expands, which means that long ago everything we see was closer together, hotter, denser, more tightly woven. Run the film backward, and galaxies unweave, stars unform, atoms lose their grip, until the very canvas of space and time tries to dissolve. Here the folk rule fails. If time begins with that first readable frame, what could make a clock before clocks? If the stage itself is part of the trick, what does it mean to ask for a stagehand? There is a clean way to say what we see without forcing it to say more. The sky is filled with a faint afterglow that arrives from every direction. It is not myth. It is a map. Slightly warmer spots and slightly cooler spots trace a pattern that we can measure, compare, and predict. This pattern tells us that the first light able to travel freely passed through a young universe that was already expanding. It tells us there was a time before which the word before has no foothold. Paradox is not a failure of curiosity here. It is a fact that observation imposes. Hold the bowl again. The child watches the moon shiver on the surface when a breeze moves the water. The image reforms as the surface stills. That is the first lesson in cosmology that anyone can learn without a textbook. A faithful image depends on the state of the mirror. Our mirrors are radio horns, cooled sensors, and wide cameras that turn gravity into a lens. They let us weigh clusters without touching them. They let us date scenes that unfolded eons before our continent had its current shape. They can be wrong in detail, but they are stubborn in pattern. This stubbornness gives us the right to move from poetry to claims. We now ask the oldest modern question. If the universe had a beginning, did something begin the beginner? Or are we misreading the grammar of beginnings? A machine in a field suggests a maker. A river suggests a spring. But a universe is not like a machine or a river. It contains the standards by which machines and rivers are measured. When we ask for a cause of the first moment, we are asking for a cause of time itself. The words we use may be pulling us into nonsense without our consent. Still, this is not a reason to shrug. It is a reason to investigate which framings remain coherent when the chain touches its own origin. One path says this: the beginning is not a wall, it is a corner. Drive north on a sphere and eventually north stops being a direction. There is no edge at the pole. Yet there is a point where your vocabulary must change. Perhaps the earliest state of the cosmos is like that. No wall, no earlier. Only a change in charting that smooths what looked like a cliff. If this is true, then some specific imprints should exist in the pattern of ancient light and in the way structure formed from that light. Corners leave marks. We can look for them. Another path says this: laws can play the role we were trained to assign to causes. If the rule that shapes empty space makes empty space unstable, then empty is not quite empty. Tiny fluctuations are permitted by the rule, and permitted fluctuations can grow. In that story, no agent need intervene. The rule is enough to seed worlds, but rules are descriptions of what happens on the stage. Asking them to act without a stage may be a category mistake. A blueprint can tell you how a house would stand, but it does not raise beams. We must decide whether the word law here means a description that depends on a world, or a boundary condition that holds whether or not anything exists to honor it. A third path refuses to sit beside the other two. It speaks from within. It claims that the chain of explanation rests on a ground that is not one more thing next to galaxies, but the source of the possibility of things. In that account, a first cause is not a first event in time. It is the reason there can be any events. That idea is slippery, because if it were sharp, we could weigh it like a planet. If it is too smooth, it says nothing at all. The honest task is to translate even this kind of talk into questions that touch the world the mirrors show us. Otherwise, it should not demand public assent. Simply put, we have a first readable frame but not a handle on a frame before frames existed. This single sentence does not crown a victor. It sets the angle. It also sets the discipline. Where claims produce forecasts about patterns in the old light or the large-scale structure of space, we can score them. Where claims do not, we can name them clearly and hold them in a separate category. Respected, but not confused with measurement. You may ask why any of this should matter in rooms where rent is due. Storms are rising, and a diagnosis is pronounced in a voice that tries to be steady. It matters because the kind of cause we believe in leaks into law, grief, duty, and art. If everything is just a chain, we may tell ourselves that responsibility is momentum. If everything is a decree, we may trade inquiry for obedience. If everything is a mirror, we may flatter preference and call it truth. A better civic life and a better personal life both benefit from clear boundaries between what the sky says and what we wish it said. The theater metaphor is our one indulgence. Imagine a black box projector humming over a room. On the ceiling, we do not yet see pictures. We see grain, a fine noise like frost on glass. Watch long enough, and the grain holds patterns that can be counted. From the counts, one can predict where the next bright knot should appear and where a faint river of light should run. None of this opens the projector. Yet the ceiling tells us something true about that sealed machine. When we change seats, the pattern remains the same. That invariance is a signature that the show is not a private dream. Public invariance is the gold we mine when consensus is hard. We should pause to meet a few words we will use with care. Singularity is a name for when our math breaks, not a physical pinprick that we can visit. Horizon is a name for the limit to what can reach us with signals, not an actual fence. Boundary is a map term that may or may not mark an actual end. These terms clarify our questions if we keep them modest. They mislead if we let them pretend to be things. We will treat them as chalk lines on the floor while we rehearse. Then we will walk past them and see if the room is larger than the chalk allowed. Return to the fire one more time. The child with the bowl asks a question that adults often fold away. If there was nothing, how can anything appear? If there was foam, then where did that something come from? The child is not naive. She is exact. She is asking what work a cause can do when time and space, the very tools of causation, are part of the effect. We are not ready to answer. We are ready to test the answers others offer by the cost they impose on logic and by the signatures they deliver to our instruments. Here is the covenant for this voyage. We will let observation lead, then let philosophy catch up, then let meaning bring up the rear. We will not let any of the three march alone. When the map resists a claim, we will say so without contempt. When a hypothesis makes a clear forecast, we will celebrate whether or not we like where it points. When a picture is beautiful but pays no rent in prediction, we will admire it and set it aside for what it is. When a picture is ugly but earns a correct forecast, we will listen. This is not a denial of mystery. It is a way to keep mystery from doing the work that only patience can do. The camera in orbit turns to a cluster whose mass outstrips its visible parts. Light bends, and the bend lets us weigh the hidden matter. We are not as blind as we once were. Gravity is not only a pull, it is a tool. Time is not only a river, it is a coordinate. With tools like these, we can describe the first gears of the cosmic clock without opening the clock, and sometimes without naming a clockmaker. Yet description is not the same as agency. To learn the difference, we will weigh not only the sky, but also our own words. Follow the chain one more time to its trembling start. If there was a first moment, there was no earlier to do the work of making. If there was no first moment, then the film must be infinitely long, and we must explain why it looks finite. If a law makes a world, then we must explain what it means for a rule to act. The fire in the center of the room is small, but intense. We will warm our hands at it, but we will not let it burn the ropes that tie us to the mast of evidence. The sea outside sings with many voices. Some are signal, some are siren. We will learn the pitch of each. The plan is precise. First, we will examine the evidence for a finite first frame and draw out what that permits and forbids. Second, we will explore models in which the universe has no edge in time and ask what marks they would leave. Third, we will interrogate the idea that descriptions can shoulder the role of causes. Fourth, we will climb along the knife edge of parameters that seem improbably tuned and test how surprise should be measured without smuggling in design or dismissal. Fifth, we will stand a moment on the notion of a necessary ground and see whether anything in experience can distinguish it from a world that is self-sufficient. Sixth, we will consider the thought that the sacred is identical with nature and ask whether meaning and obligation survive that move. Seventh, we will turn the mirror inward and follow the symbols that human minds generate when they reach for the whole. Along the way, the plane will alternate with the technical like day with night. Where a new term appears, we will slow down. Where two or more stack in a short space, we will offer an image or an example. We will keep the one metaphor we have chosen and resist the urge to decorate. One device, one thread of music, one North Star. The rest is quiet attention to what the sky actually contains. We can now return to the child in the bowl. The wind drops. The moon steadies. She breathes and lets the water still. A line becomes a circle, and the circle is whole. That is our cue. Before we argue about what outside cause could cut the ribbon of time, we will look for the marks of a beginning that is not quite a boundary. We will look for the day without yesterday and learn how a cosmos can light a first frame without invoking an earlier hour. If this journey resonates, like and subscribe to the Quiet Universe channel. We start by rewinding the film to the faint first frame, the day without yesterday. There is a point in the story of time where the word before loses its meaning. Astronomers have traced that point not through faith, but through faintness, through the soft light that fills the universe like an ancient whisper. When radio antennas first caught that background noise, it was not cosmic grandeur they sought, but a technical fault. The signal persisted. It came from every direction, steady, cold, impossible to shield. It was the first clear sign that our cosmic film has an opening scene. The light we see today is the cooled echo of that first blaze. What we call a beginning is not a creation in progress, but a temperature, a density, a rhythm still embedded in every atom. The universe has memory, and that memory glows. The phrase "day without yesterday" was once spoken by a scientist who dared to describe the earliest chapter of existence not as a single flash, but as the boundary of language itself. The image is haunting. A day without yesterday is not a normal day stripped of morning. It is a condition where morning does not exist yet. The question is not what happened before, but whether the term before belongs to this domain at all. Our mathematics can stretch close to that border, but it cannot cross it. The laws that govern stars and planets begin to tremble when the stage on which they act folds into a single point. What remains is a silence that data must respect. We can measure that silence. Point telescopes at empty sky. And the emptiness hums. Every cubic meter contains hundreds of relic photons left from the universe's first readable frame. They form a near-perfect blackbody, cooled to just under 3 degrees above absolute zero. That temperature is a fossil, a piece of evidence older than any rock. The expansion of space itself has stretched those waves for billions of years, turning the first white blaze into a deep microwave glow. We live in a cooled fire. The light that once blinded everything now barely warms the darkness. It is tempting to call that first condition a singularity, but the word hides more than it reveals. It marks the failure of our equations, not a physical object that can be pictured. Singularity simply means that when we try to divide by zero, the universe refuses to give an answer. This refusal is not a wall. It is an invitation to rethink what we mean by cause and time. If space and time curve into one another, then the first instant may be less a moment in a timeline and more a closed surface, smooth and self-sufficient. In that picture, there is no need for an external spark. The fire lights itself by its geometry. Think of a globe. Ask for the point 1 mile north of the North Pole. The question fails because north ceases to be defined there. No traveler stands at an edge of the world. They stand at a change in coordinates. The same could be true for the beginning of time. The Big Bang might not be an explosion into emptiness, but a local change in direction within a larger, timeless structure. What we call before might be like the other side of the pole, unreachable not because it is forbidden, but because the concept has lost coherence. This is not mystical evasion, it is geometry carried to its logical end. At its core, this view alters what we mean by beginning. A beginning without a before is not an act, but a boundary condition. It is the shape of possibility itself. We can compute the density, the curvature, the pattern of fluctuations that emerge from such a smooth start, and compare them to the data we see. In these comparisons, the idea earns its keep. When the numbers align, we have reason to believe that a day without yesterday is more than a poetic phrase. It is a map drawn in microwaves, confirmed by detectors cooled near absolute zero and satellites that scan the sky with mechanical patience. The instruments that gave us this confidence are as fragile as the thought itself. They must shield themselves from the heat of the sun, from the whisper of their own circuits, from the radiation of Earth. Their eyes must remain colder than the space they observe. They are built not to see bright points, but to register differences of thousandths of a degree. From these differences, the shape of the early cosmos appears. Hills and valleys in temperature correspond to the seeds of galaxies and clusters. The story of everything large begins with imperfections smaller than imagination. If perfection had been absolute, nothing would have formed. Slight flaws are the reason structure exists. Why should we care about such abstract frost? Because it teaches humility about beginnings. The data do not show a place where time started ticking from zero like a clock wound by an unseen hand. They show a transition, a cooling, a shift from opacity to transparency. Before that, the universe was dense enough that light could not travel. Space was filled with charged particles constantly colliding, reabsorbing every photon before it could flee. When expansion thinned the crowd, light was finally free to wander. That freedom is what we now observe. The first visible light is not a birthday candle. It is the moment when sight became possible. Imagine standing inside a fog so thick you cannot see your own hand. As the fog thins, shapes emerge. You did not move into a new world. The world became transparent. The day without yesterday is that clearing fog. In this image, the question of who lit the flame becomes secondary to the fact that we can still read its residue. The power of cosmology lies not in claiming to know what preceded the first instant, but in mapping the horizon of knowability itself. A paradox waits at the edge of this clarity. If the universe had a finite age, can it also be infinite in extent? Current models say yes, the cosmos may be spatially vast beyond measure, yet temporally young. Like a flat plane that stretches forever but rises from a single hill, it can be endless in space and bounded in time. That is the geometry of our visible realm finite age, unbounded reach. There is poetry in that balance. It hints that beginnings and infinities are not opposites but partners. Our ancestors looked at the night sky and saw a dome. Later minds saw an expanding fabric. Now we suspect that the true shape of time is closer to a closed curve, a globe of causation with no outer rim. If so, the universe does not need an external creator in time, because time is part of the creation. Asking what happened before time is like asking what lies north of the North Pole. The question points beyond the coordinate system that gives it meaning. This realization does not abolish wonder. It reframes it. The wonder shifts from asking what agency acted before to asking why there is a lawful structure at all. So, we are left with evidence, not certainty. The cosmic background glow, the distribution of galaxies, the patterns of temperature and polarization all support a universe with a finite, readable past and perhaps no singular moment of birth. Each new measurement sharpens this portrait. The day without yesterday is not a void, but a dawn seen from outside of time's window. It is the simplest picture, consistent with everything we can check. And that simplicity is its elegance. Yet it is also fragile. Another discovery could bend it again, as light bends around a hidden mass. That is the honest condition of our knowledge. Provisional, but cumulative. The phrase still carries emotional weight. To live in a universe that had a beginning but perhaps no before is to inhabit a mystery that remains open, not a closed theorem. It reminds us that even if we could trace every particle to its origin, the existence of the whole would still demand reflection. Meaning is not guaranteed by measurement, but measurement guards meaning from dissolving into fantasy. Between those two, we balance. We end this first exploration not with an answer, but with a shift in focus. The next step is to ask whether the smoothness that rescued us from a singular beginning also erases the need for an edge at all, and whether a universe with no temporal border can truly be said to have started. If the first act of creation was not a flash, but a horizon, what lies beyond that horizon? The idea of a universe with no edge in time is a challenge to the way human thought draws borders. Every map we make begins with a line. But what if the line that separates past from not yet past is itself an illusion born of our limited view? To imagine such a universe, we must unlearn the habit of thinking in straight lines and learn to think in loops, curves, and closures. At the end of the last chapter, the frame of time seemed to bend back on itself, closing the hole where before should be. This is the essence of the no-boundary proposal. It does not claim that nothing preceded the universe, only that the language of before is meaningless when time behaves like space. In ordinary experience, time is the one dimension that refuses symmetry. You can move north or south, left or right, but never backward in time. Yet when the universe was dense enough, the difference between temporal and spatial directions may have blurred. In that haze, the early cosmos might have been finite yet without edges, like the surface of a sphere where no traveler ever falls off. In plain terms, the universe could be self-contained, with no moment that counts as a starting gun. The mathematical picture uses imaginary time, a rotation of perspective that makes the equations smooth. To most ears, that phrase sounds like fantasy. But the trick has a clear purpose. It removes the singularity by reclassifying the sharp border as a soft bend. In this geometry, time wraps around in a way that prevents infinities from forming. When the calculation is translated back into real time, the result looks like a universe that emerges gradually, as if the dawn brightens without a discrete first second. The visualization is strange, but not impossible. Picture the Earth's surface again, and imagine walking south until you reach the South Pole. At that point, the direction called south ends. Yet the planet continues. The no-edge universe works on the same principle. The first instant is not an edge where the rules break, but a smooth cap where temporal direction fades. You cannot go further south than the pole because south ceases to mean anything there. Likewise, you cannot go earlier than the first moment because earlier loses meaning. The pole still exists, but it is not a border. It is a feature of the whole. This way of thinking unsettles the human appetite for origin stories. We prefer to trace things to a definite spark, a cause we can picture. But a self-contained universe leaves us with structure instead of agency. There is no external clockmaker winding the mechanism, only the fabric of space-time curving in ways that allow expansion. The aesthetic is austere, yet there is beauty in its self-sufficiency. The cosmos is not an artifact, but a geometry that breathes. Its laws are not commands given from outside, but relationships woven within the whole. One might ask how such a concept could ever be tested. Fortunately, geometry leaves fingerprints. If the early universe had a smooth cap instead of a sharp edge, its ripples should follow a specific pattern. The amplitude of temperature fluctuations in the cosmic background would differ subtly from models with a true singular beginning. Satellites that map the sky have searched for these patterns, and while the data are not decisive, they show hints of a universe that began in a calm rather than a violent state. The oldest light is astonishingly uniform, deviating by only 1 part in 100,000. This evenness supports the idea of a rounded start, though it does not prove it. Why does this matter? Because it changes what we mean by cause. In an unbounded universe, causes are internal loops rather than external pushes. The laws that describe the cosmos do not stand apart from it. They are the patterns it follows by existing. When we say the universe created itself, we are not suggesting a magician pulling itself from a hat. We are saying that the equations describing space and time contain no reference to anything beyond themselves. The system does not need an external frame because it is the frame. That is a hard sentence to digest. But it is what the math implies. There is a humility in realizing that the question, what happened before, might be like asking what color is north. The words feel right until they reach a domain where they no longer apply. Still, the heart resists. The human mind longs for stories with beginnings. Our myths and our sciences share that longing. To abandon it is not to give up meaning, but to shift its seat. The wonder moves from the spark to the structure. We are awed not by an act, but by the coherence of an infinite curvature that sustains itself without edges. A no-edge universe also softens the problem of infinity. A cosmos that loops in time can be finite in measure while remaining unbounded. It does not collapse into an endless regress of yesterdays. Instead, it closes on itself like a melody that resolves its chord. The notion of imaginary time helps mathematicians model this closure, but one need not master the formulas to grasp the intuition. It is the difference between an open interval and a circle. The circle has no start or end, yet it is not infinite. It repeats, not in the sense of recurring history, but in the sense of completeness. Every point belongs. None lies outside. For many thinkers, this idea removes the need for a prime mover. If time is finite yet unbounded, asking what triggered it is as misplaced as asking who holds up the earth in space. The geometry holds it up. The notion of before the universe evaporates. But absence of a trigger does not mean absence of meaning. It invites a more delicate question. Why does anything obey a geometry at all? Why does order exist when chaos could have ruled? These are questions the no-edge model cannot answer, but they mark the frontier where cosmology meets metaphysics. Human imagination rebels against total self-containment. When we encounter a sealed loop, we look for a keyhole. It is difficult to picture reality needing no outside reference. Our entire language of causation is shaped by daily life, where events follow each other in time. Yet the universe's earliest moments were not daily life. The same equations that let us predict orbits and light also tell us that space-time itself can be finite. The paradox here is not proof of confusion, but proof that we have reached the limits of analogy. We can describe what the math says. We cannot live it directly. There is an image that helps. Imagine a sheet of ice forming on a lake. At first, the crystals appear randomly, then they link, forming a smooth surface. The ice has no preferred center. It emerges everywhere at once when conditions allow. The birth of time could be like that phase change. There was no privileged spot or instant, only a transition from a state where time had no meaning to one where time became measurable. The lake does not need an origin for its surface. The surface is simply a property of the water once it cools below a threshold. Likewise, the arrow of time may be a property of the universe cooling below the energy where geometry becomes smooth. Some critics say that replacing an edge with a loop only hides the problem, but this is unfair. The no-edge model is not an escape. It is a redefinition. It shows that what we call a beginning might not require an external cause, because beginning itself is a feature inside the system. This is similar to how a coordinate singularity in mathematics can be removed by changing perspective. The North Pole looks singular on a flat map, yet on a globe it is perfectly regular. The universe may be the same way. Our flat intuitions generate singularities that the real curvature does not possess. The implications ripple outward. If time is a closed geometry, then perhaps the universe has no final edge either. Just as it lacks a past boundary, it might lack a future one. In that case, the idea of ultimate end or eternal recurrence becomes less important than the ongoing texture of change. The cosmos does not need a rebirth cycle. It simply is, endlessly varying within a finite whole. The future may be as intrinsic as the past, another dimension within a timeless structure that humans cut into slices for convenience. At the human scale, this model offers both comfort and unease. Comfort, because it suggests that we are part of a self-consistent pattern that does not depend on miracle. Unease, because it strips away the notion of external purpose. Yet meaning can survive inside the loop. We can locate wonder in the fact that mathematics written on paper matches the behavior of galaxies and photons. The coherence of that match is its own kind of grace. The absence of an edge does not erase significance. It transforms it into participation. To exist is to be one of the curves within the whole. Ultimately, a universe with no temporal border is an act of elegance. It replaces a bang with a curve, a command with a condition. It removes the cliff, but leaves the climb. It tells us that what we call origin may instead be geometry at rest, and that our question why is there something might always rebound, as why is geometry stable? This is not an answer, but a mirror, and in that mirror we see the humility of knowing that our words can sketch but never encompass the total. We stand at the inner edge of understanding, gazing toward a continuity that neither begins nor ends. We step from the smooth horizon of no boundaries toward a sharper question if laws shape this self-contained cosmos. Can those laws truly act, or are they only the grammar of description? In the chapters before, we followed light backward until time itself began to curve. Now, with the edge softened and the horizon smoothed, another puzzle rises from the quiet if the universe has no external boundary. What gives it motion? Can laws alone create the stage they describe, or is there something that breathes reality into the rules? The question sounds abstract, but it touches the root of causation. We live by laws. We build bridges, drive currents, and design satellites by their predictability. Yet when we speak of laws acting before matter, before time, before space, the very meaning of action begins to blur. In everyday language, a law is not an agent. Gravity does not reach out and pull. It states that masses behave as though they attract. The difference seems small, but it is essential. A law is a pattern noticed and expressed, not a command issued. When people say, "The law of gravity caused an apple to fall," they mean that the apple's motion fits a measured relationship. The law itself does nothing. It is a record of what happens when matter behaves as it does. The danger lies in forgetting this distinction, in turning description into a doer. Once that happens, physics turns into theology by another name. To test this idea, imagine a blueprint of a house. The lines and numbers show how walls and beams should stand. The drawing has structure, clarity, elegance. But until materials are gathered and forces applied, no one can walk inside. The same holds for equations. They can be precise, complete, even beautiful, yet without a domain to govern, they remain inert. A law alone cannot summon the thing it governs, just as a recipe cannot cook itself. This is the first contradiction we face. Our most powerful tool for explaining reality cannot exist independently of the reality it explains. Physicists sometimes describe a vacuum state, a region empty of particles but full of energy and fluctuation. Even emptiness seethes. Pairs of particles appear and vanish, obeying the rules of quantum fields. From such activity, some theories suggest entire universes might emerge. The claim is that laws can generate matter from the instability of nothing. But this nothing is not true absence. It is a physical system with defined properties, symmetries, and constants. It is an arena already structured. The laws do not act from outside. They operate within a medium that already exists. The question simply shifts back a step. What gives the rules their stage? There is an image that helps. Picture a courtroom, empty, but for the judge's bench. The law is written in a book on the table. If there are no citizens, no judge, and no world, the law sits silent. It can define order only within a society that practices it. Similarly, physical law has meaning only within a cosmos that manifests it. Asking how laws create the cosmos is like asking how grammar writes a novel without a writer or a language. Structure alone is not self-starting. There must be at least one state of being for the rule to take effect. At its core, this is the difference between potential and actuality. The laws of motion define what could happen, not what must. To turn possibility into existence, something must move. Whether that something is an intrinsic instability, a timeless necessity, or an uncaused fact, remains the heart of debate. Some thinkers argue that potentiality itself can be enough, that the simplest possible condition will spontaneously express its possibilities. Others counter that possibility without reality is meaningless. A blank page can hold infinite stories, but until ink meets fiber, none exist. Why should this matter? Because the answer shapes the way we interpret the authority of science. If laws are mere descriptions, then science maps patterns that already exist and can change when deeper structures are found. If laws are causal, they are closer to fate, and experiments merely reveal an inevitable script. The truth seems to lie between laws are consistent regularities that allow prediction, but they do not enforce those regularities by decree. They reflect the universe's self-consistency rather than command it. Their power lies in being true of everything that can happen, not in forcing events to occur. Consider the idea of symmetry breaking. The early universe may have possessed perfect balance between forces. As it cooled, that symmetry cracked, and distinct forces appeared: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak interactions. The laws we know may be the residues of deeper unity. They are not external commands, but patterns frozen into the fabric during that cooling. The distinction between cause and description blurs again. The laws emerge with the universe. They do not precede it. In that sense, saying the laws make the world is like saying the shape of ice makes the lake freeze. The shape and the freezing are one act seen from two sides. We can frame this more gently. Imagine tuning a guitar. The strings tighten until they vibrate at particular frequencies. The laws are like the relationships between the notes, constant across all guitars. Yet there must be a guitar, strings, tension, and space for sound to travel. The relationships are universal, but they are not self-playing. The cosmos is both the instrument and the sound. Laws describe the harmony. The matter of the universe performs it. To call the harmony the cause of the music is half true and half backward. In plain terms, saying laws create worlds may be poetic shorthand for a deeper truth. The universe is lawful through and through, wherever we look. From atoms to galaxies, order persists. That order is astonishing enough to warrant reverence. But it is not the same as agency. A poem follows grammar, yet grammar does not compose the poem. Still, the fact that grammar exists is remarkable. Why is the cosmos ordered at all? Why not chaos without rule? This question is where physics meets awe, the place where explanation stops being comfortable. If laws are neither imposed from outside nor invented by minds, then perhaps they are discovered features of a reality that cannot be otherwise. Some philosophers call such features necessary truths. They hold in every possible world, not because they are decreed, but because their denial would be nonsense. 2 plus 2 equals 4, not by law, but by structure. Could the laws of nature be like that? Reflections of logical consistency at the deepest level. Perhaps the universe exists because it is one of the few possible arrangements that do not contradict themselves. In this view, existence is the realization of coherence. Yet coherence alone does not explain why there is something rather than nothing. We can imagine a universe consistent in principle, but still non-existent. So the puzzle returns what gives the logical structure actuality. Some suggest that there is no distinction, that existence and consistency are identical. Others see a gap that cannot be closed by reasoning alone. Either way, our metaphors begin to strain. We can follow the equations, but not the ontological leap from zero to presence. Let us return to the human scale. A scientist writes a formula on a board. The chalk squeaks. The symbols hold. Those symbols can predict the trajectory of a comet or the decay of a particle. The chalk is matter. The board is matter. And both obey the very rules they describe. In describing, we participate. Perhaps that is the real meaning of law-creating world. Not that equations act, but that reality and reasoning are two expressions of the same structure. The world computes itself, and we are part of the computation. There is a humility that follows from this realization. Laws may be accurate, elegant, and testable, but they do not belong to us or to any external author. They are the grammar of being. Whether that grammar exists eternally or arises with the universe, we cannot yet say. What we can do is measure, verify, and refine. Each measurement tells us that the rules remain the same across distances that light cannot bridge in a human life. That reliability is the foundation of every technology and every belief in order. Still, the tension remains. Can description ever replace cause? Can mathematics alone suffice to bring about existence? Our instruments can record how matter behaves, but they cannot show why matter must exist to behave at all. That why may be beyond the reach of test, or it may hide in principles not yet discovered. The edge between physics and philosophy is thin, and here they meet again in quiet recognition that both depend on wonder disciplined by reason. If laws cannot act alone, then perhaps something gives them weight, a boundary condition that anchors their symmetry to being. The search for that condition, whether in fine-tuning or necessity, is where we turn next, to the razor edge on which the cosmos balances. When the first elements formed in the newborn universe, they did so with an exactness that defies casual language. A proton weighs a little more than an electron. The charge of each balances to the same decimal places, and the strength of the forces between them sits within a narrow band where chemistry is possible. Shift any of these constants by a fraction, and the cosmos would be stillborn. Stars would never ignite, or they would burn so fast that no stable atoms could form. In every equation, the margins are thin. We live on the blade's edge, balanced between chaos and void. At first, this looks like an accident of arithmetic, a coincidence of numbers. Yet the pattern repeats everywhere we look. The cosmological constant that drives the expansion of space is tiny. 1 part in 10 to the power of 120 compared to what theory predicts. If it were even a little larger, the universe would have torn itself apart before galaxies coalesced. If it were smaller, gravity would have crushed matter into black holes long ago. The nuclear force binds protons in atomic cores, make it slightly weaker, and only hydrogen survives. Make it slightly stronger, and no hydrogen remains to build stars. The ratios look tuned. The question is tuned by what? Physicists have tried to remove this uncanny precision by invoking chance. Maybe there are countless universes, each with different constants. In such a vast lottery, one naturally produces conditions friendly to life, and we simply find ourselves in that rare world because no observers could exist in the others. It is a pragmatic answer, not an aesthetic one. The multiverse hypothesis moves the mystery instead of dissolving it. Instead of asking why this universe fits, we ask why the ensemble of all universes exists. We trade one improbability for another, hiding the edge inside an ocean. There is another view, less spectacular but equally unsettling. Perhaps the apparent tuning is illusion. Perhaps life adjusts to the constants, not the other way around. If the laws had been different, something else might have emerged to notice them. Yet even that humility falters before certain facts. Without long-lived stars, there is no time for complexity to arise. Without stable nuclei, no chemistry can build bridges between elements. The universe may not be designed, but it is undeniably structured to permit structure. Meaning seeps from that phrase whether we invite it or not. In plain terms, we inhabit a range of balance so narrow that it invites metaphor. The universe is like a tightrope walker crossing an invisible wire stretched between two abysses. On one side lies collapse. On the other, dissolution. The wire itself is woven from constants and ratios. Why this wire exists at all is the riddle. We can measure its tension, but we cannot yet say who, if anyone, strung it. Some physicists hope that a deeper theory will show that the constants are not chosen but necessary, consequences of symmetry rather than gifts of luck. If that symmetry is ever found, the sense of tuning might vanish, replaced by inevitability. But until then, the balance looks deliberate. This precariousness fuels two different kinds of wonder. One leads toward design, the idea that parameters were set by intelligence. The other leads toward depth, the belief that our equations only scratch the surface of a larger necessity. Both responses are attempts to fill silence with meaning. The scientist tests, the philosopher interprets. In the tension between them, understanding grows. Each new observation narrows the permissible range further, showing just how thin the razor truly is. Yet even if future physics explains the constants, another question will wait beneath. Why do any consistent laws exist to explain? Consider a baker at dawn. She measures flour, water, and yeast with care. Too much yeast. The dough bursts. Too little. It lies flat. The loaf that emerges depends on proportions. In the cosmic kitchen, the recipe is perfect, but there is no visible baker. What holds these ingredients in their exact ratio? If we attribute it to chance, we must accept odds so small that language fails. If we invoke necessity, we must show why no other outcome could occur. Neither answer feels final. One can test how sensitive the balance is. Computer simulations alter one constant at a time, and nearly every change erases complexity. Some universes produce no carbon. Some expand too quickly for stars to form. Some never allow atoms to combine. Only within a narrow corridor does stability persist. It is not anthropocentrism to notice this. It is arithmetic. We are not special, but the conditions that permit any sentient question are rare enough to startle. The fine-tuning debate is often framed as a duel between faith and physics, but that framing is too small. The deeper issue is epistemological: how we handle coincidence when patterns repeat across scales. A scientist sees the pattern and searches for a unifying law. A poet sees the same pattern and calls it grace. Both are correct in spirit, because both recognize the unity of balance. What divides them is the language of cause. We must learn to speak both dialects without letting either dominate. Imagine again the blade, a narrow ridge separating two abysses. The ridge is not an external platform. It is the outcome of feedback. The forces of nature counterweigh one another, holding equilibrium like tension in a bowstring. If gravity pulls too hard, expansion yields. If expansion outruns gravity, galaxies fly apart. Somewhere between pull and flight lies the harmony we call cosmos. The miracle is not that it exists, but that it persists. It has done so for nearly 14 billion years without snapping. Why does this matter? Because the razor's edge defines our sense of fragility and gratitude. Knowing that existence depends on delicate balance can make us feel small. Yet it also connects us to the precision of nature. It means we are not intruders in an indifferent system, but expressions of its balance. The same ratios that keep stars burning also allow neurons to fire. Awareness itself is a consequence of cosmic calibration. Some thinkers have tried to quantify the odds. They speak of probabilities, of constants dialed within 1 part in a trillion, but probability presumes a distribution of possibilities that may not exist. There may never have been dice to roll. The universe might simply be the only self-consistent configuration. In that sense, it is not fine-tuned. It is self-selected by coherence. It exists because it can, and nothing else can stand without contradiction. This would turn accident into identity, replacing surprise with necessity. If that conclusion is true, then the razor's edge is not a sign of fragility, but of stability. The narrowness of the range becomes evidence that any world must satisfy these conditions to exist at all. The knife is not suspended. It is part of the table. The perception of danger comes from our limited view. Yet even necessity can inspire awe. To live in a world that cannot be otherwise is to participate in the logic of existence itself. The search continues, through colliders that smash particles, through satellites that measure starlight, through equations that unify forces. Each attempt seeks the principle that explains why constants hold the values they do. Whether we find a symmetry, a multiverse, or something stranger. The pursuit itself is sacred in the secular sense it orders our curiosity. The cosmos does not need belief to be beautiful, but belief in its intelligibility drives discovery. The balance of constants also challenges our sense of morality. If everything is calibrated to permit life, then responsibility follows. Fragile systems deserve care. Our planet, a thin film of conditions within a thin range of heat and light, mirrors the larger cosmic precision. We survive only by respecting balance, and the laws that shape galaxies also shape climate, ecosystems, and choices. Physics and ethics share a geometry deviation beyond a limit invites collapse. Ultimately, the razor's edge is not a physical line but a metaphor for awareness. To know that reality could have been barren is to feel the weight of being. We walk the tightrope each day without falling, not through merit but through the steady tension of laws that neither overreach nor fail, whether their origin is chance, necessity, or something nameless. The result is the same, a universe that sings in key. At its heart, the question remains unsolved, and perhaps unresolvable. Can pure law generate existence? Or does existence give law its form? The answer may not come from calculation, but from humility. The equations are mirrors, and behind them we glimpse only ourselves marveling at the balance. The edge cuts both ways. It divides knowledge from mystery, and it binds them together. We leave the knife's glittering surface and step toward the stone beneath it, the question of whether any ground is necessary at all. Every question about beginnings hides another behind it. When we ask what started the universe, we soon ask what started the cause we just named. The chain retreats forever, a mirror that reflects itself to exhaustion, to stop the regress. Some thinkers have searched for what they call a necessary ground, something that simply must exist and cannot not be. It would not depend on anything else. It would be the root of possibility itself. The phrase sounds absolute. Yet the more we look at it, the more its edges dissolve. Can there be a foundation that needs no foundation? To find such a ground, we must first clarify what necessary means. In logic, a necessary truth holds in all possible worlds. 2 + 2 = 4, not by decree, but by coherence. In metaphysics, a necessary being would exist in every possible reality for the same reason. If it were absent, contradiction would follow. That being, if real, would not require a maker or a moment of creation. It would be self-explaining. Some call it God, others call it being, others simply the totality of what can exist. The names differ, but the intuition remains the same. Something must sit at the bottom of the ladder, or the ladder falls. The difficulty is that every attempt to describe this necessary ground smuggles dependence back in. To say it must exist is to reference a rule of necessity that stands above it. To say it causes all else implies time and relation, which themselves would need grounding. The idea begins to eat its own tail. We end with a sentence that cannot be tested, only believed or bracketed. Yet even if it cannot be proved, the concept performs work. It offers closure where reason would otherwise run in circles forever. One approach recasts necessity as self-consistency. The universe exists because it cannot be otherwise without contradiction. Reality is the only equation that balances. In this picture, nothing stands outside the whole. There is no need for an external builder. The structure sustains itself because any alternative would violate logic. That is a radical thought, the cosmos as a tautology. A truth so complete it explains itself by existing, but it also raises a new problem. Logic is an abstract language. Can abstract coherence alone bring about substance? Does the symmetry of reason carry the weight of matter? Think of a stone bridge spanning a river. Its arch holds not because of magic, but because each block presses against the others in balance. Remove one stone, and the rest collapse. The bridge has no single block that bears all weight. Stability arises from mutual support. A universe that needs no external ground could be like that. Every part depends on every other, yet the whole stands. Causation, then, is not vertical, but circular. Existence supports itself by consistency, as an arch supports itself by geometry. In plain terms, the search for a first cause may be replaced by the recognition of a closed system. Nothing outside sustains it. The sustaining happens within. This idea strips away comfort and leaves elegance. It does not tell us who or why, only that the question who made it might misfire. The universe could be a fact without alternative, not chosen, not born, not decreed. Simply real. The human mind rebels against such naked existence because we are creatures of dependency. We begin in time, we end in time. And between those points we crave explanation. Yet explanation may stop where necessity begins. Still, necessity does not feel like enough. We want to know why necessity is necessary. If reality exists because it cannot not exist, what enforces that cannot? Is there a deeper law ensuring coherence? And if so, are we not back where we started, with a law that needs a ground? The argument curls inward again. Perhaps this circularity is not a flaw, but a clue. If the universe is self-contained, any valid description must loop. Self-reference might be the signature of self-existence. Some philosophers call this the principle of sufficient reason. Nothing is without cause or explanation, including the totality. For them, an ungrounded world would be brute fact, an intellectual scandal. Others accept the scandal and call it honesty. Maybe the chain of reason ends, not in a final link, but in the recognition that asking for explanation presupposes existence. The fact that there is something to ask about may be the only necessary truth. In that light, the ground that needs no ground is not an object, but a limit to questioning. It is the horizon where inquiry touches what cannot be otherwise. The language of physics sometimes echoes this without meaning to. Equations that describe the universe often contain constants whose values seem arbitrary. Yet the system works only when they stand as they are. Perhaps those constants are not contingent at all. They may be what they must be for the universe to exist. We cannot vary them without destroying the stage that allows variation. The cosmos could be the mathematical equivalent of a stable orbit, resting in the only configuration that avoids contradiction. There is another metaphor that fits a circle drawn perfectly round. Every point depends on every other for its definition. There is no first point on a circle. If you pick one, it is by convention, not nature. A self-grounded universe might be like that circle, complete without an external compass. Time, space, and law would not be layers stacked upon each other, but aspects of one continuous geometry. The circle holds itself together because its shape is its cause. Why does this matter? Because it defines the boundary between knowledge and humility. To accept a self-sufficient cosmos is to admit that reason reaches an end, a place where asking why adds nothing. Yet it also means that we belong to something internally consistent, not arbitrary. The recognition that existence may be necessary can inspire not despair, but trust. It tells us that the fabric of reality is not poised on a cliff, it stands on itself. There is, of course, the human temptation to personify necessity. We turn it into a mind, a will, a being. That move might make sense symbolically, but it blurs categories. The ground that needs no ground is not a character behind the curtain. It is the curtain, the stage, the play, and the light that reveals them. To reframe it as an actor within the play is to confuse metaphor for structure. The true mystery may not be personal at all. It may be the quiet coherence of totality. The reason anything stable can exist in principle. At its most practical, this line of thought changes how we relate to uncertainty. If the universe is self-contained, then inquiry is an act within it, not a path out of it. There is no outside vantage point from which to observe the whole. Our knowledge grows by tracing local patterns that echo the total structure. Every discovery folds back into the same circle. The scientist measuring cosmic background radiation, the philosopher defining necessity, the poet describing being as breath, all are expressions of the same self-referential truth. Existence understands itself through its parts. Simply put, the ground that needs no ground is less an answer than a transformation of the question. It shifts what made it into why is making possible at all. This shift moves from metaphysics to ontology, from event to condition. It does not end wonder. It refines it. The cosmos, seen this way, is not something resting on pillars, but a seamless field whose very persistence is its justification. We can return once more to the image of the arch, stand beneath it, and look up. The pressure that could destroy it instead holds it firm. Each stone leans on the next. Each resists collapse by yielding slightly to gravity. The more you study it, the less you can isolate a single element that explains the structure. Stability arises from relation, not from a privileged part. Perhaps the universe is like that, held together by the mutual necessity of all that is. It stands because it cannot fall without unmaking itself. This realization does not end the search for meaning. It deepens it. If everything that exists is self-sustaining, then our lives are small versions of that coherence. Our choices, our reasoning, our art are all local expressions of the universe maintaining balance within itself. To live with awareness of this is to live without the fear that everything rests on nothing. The nothing is only the space where relation becomes complete. The quest for ultimate foundation thus turns inside out. The solid ground we hope to find beneath reality might be reality itself, looping back in perfect closure. There is no turtle beneath the turtle, no base below the base. The questioner and the questioned are part of one pattern, rising and returning, needing no anchor outside their own being. We move forward now from this self-sustaining symmetry toward another possibility, that the whole we call reality may not only be necessary but sacred, and that divinity might be nothing more or less than nature aware of itself. The oldest claim in philosophy is that everything is one. Across ages and continents, mystics, mathematicians, and physicists have chased that single sentence as if it were a secret code to the universe. If all things arise from one essence, then division is illusion, and difference is temporary. The notion sounds serene, yet when pressed, it fractures into paradox. If all is one, why does the world look divided? If unity is truth, why is the experience of separation so persuasive? Between these questions lies a tension that shapes both science and spirit. In the language of physics, unity means unification. Forces once thought distinct turn out to share a common rule under deeper scrutiny. Electricity and magnetism merged into electromagnetism. The weak force joined them at higher energies. Gravity, however, still stands apart. The dream of unifying it with the rest has driven the search for a theory of everything. If that dream succeeds, it would mean that every event, from star formation to human thought, unfolds from one fundamental symmetry. The universe would not be a collage of laws, but a single equation wearing many masks. But even if the equations unite, the mystery persists. A single rule can generate enormous variety. From one algorithm, infinite patterns emerge. Water obeys one chemistry, yet it can be vapor, liquid, or ice. The same hydrogen and oxygen, different arrangements. So, the claim that all is one may describe the source, not the surface. The oneness underneath does not erase difference, it gives birth to it. Multiplicity is the visible face of unity, not its denial. Still, the human mind struggles to hold both truths at once. We crave distinction and continuity, individuality and belonging, all in one frame. In plain terms, the idea that everything is one may not mean sameness, it may mean connectedness. Every particle interacts with others through fields that span space. The light from distant galaxies threads through magnetic webs that extend everywhere. Nothing truly isolates itself. The air in your lungs contains atoms forged in ancient stars. Each heartbeat sends ripples of heat into the background radiation. Existence is a single conversation conducted through endless voices. There is an experiment that hints at this quantum entanglement. Two particles born together remain linked so that measuring one instantly affects the description of the other, even when separated by vast distance. The effect does not transmit information faster than light, yet it defies the classical idea of separateness. The pair acts as one system across space. If nature allows such correlation at the smallest scale, perhaps the entire universe is an entangled whole. Every local event is a note in a global chord. Yet unity has a shadow. To say that all is one can flatten the meaning of individuality. If distinctions are illusion, then values, choices, and boundaries risk dissolving. Ethics depends on difference. Love requires another to love. The insight of oneness can enlighten or erase. That is why each culture that preaches unity also warns of imbalance. Too much unity becomes monotony, the death of pattern. The universe thrives on contrast. Light needs darkness to be visible. Life needs decay to renew. A cosmos of pure oneness would have no change. And without change, no story. The scientific version of oneness, the unified field, also faces limits. The closer we come to unifying forces, the more complexity appears. Attempts to merge quantum theory and relativity lead to equations that explode into infinities. String theory promises harmony but demands extra dimensions and vast landscapes of possibilities. Instead of one theory, we get a near infinity of potential models. The unity recedes as we chase it. It is as if the universe resists total simplification, insisting that one can be true only if it contains the many. Imagine looking through a kaleidoscope. The mirror pieces multiply a single bead into patterns that never repeat. Rotate the tube, and the design changes. But the source remains the same. This is a picture of unity in motion, sameness generating difference. The viewer who forgets the mirrors sees chaos. The viewer who sees only the mirrors misses beauty. Understanding requires both. Our minds stand somewhere between these extremes, seeking a middle path where unity and diversity coexist. Why does this matter? Because it reframes our role in the universe. If all is connected, responsibility expands. Harm done to the environment is harm done to ourselves. But if unity is incomplete, then freedom remains real, and creativity has room to act. We are not puppets in a single mechanism, nor isolated accidents. We are nodes in a network of necessity and chance. Recognizing that balance may be the most mature form of spirituality, to belong without dissolving, to differ without division. At the human level, the idea of oneness finds its echo in consciousness. When you close your eyes and sense awareness itself, you cannot find a border between the observer and the observed. The act of noticing folds back into itself. This introspective unity mirrors the cosmic one. Mind and matter, subject and object, appear as two sides of a single process. But just as physical unity does not cancel diversity, inner unity does not cancel the multiplicity of minds. We share one ocean of awareness, but each wave has its form. The tension between one and many is not a problem to be solved, but a rhythm to be lived. Nature expresses unity through opposition, positive and negative, charge and field, particle and wave, expansion and contraction. The play of duality generates motion. Without polarity, no energy flows. The same holds in thought. Ideas sharpen against their opposites. To know that we are part of one reality is not to deny conflict, but to see it as the engine of creation. Harmony is not stillness, but balance in motion. Simply put, the phrase "all is one" is both true and incomplete. It captures the coherence of being, but not its texture. Unity explains the source. Multiplicity explains the experience. To stop at either is to miss half the truth. The beauty lies in oscillation, the universe breathing between the whole and its parts, never frozen in either. Perhaps that is why every culture tells stories of gods dividing and reuniting, of worlds breaking and healing. These myths echo the cosmic pattern itself. There is also a scientific echo. The cosmic web, a vast network of galaxies linked by filaments of matter, looks like a neural network when viewed from above. The macro mirrors the micro. The same mathematical laws that shape a cell's growth describe the clustering of galaxies. Scale changes. Pattern endures. The unity of form does not erase difference. It reveals kinship. We belong to a hierarchy of patterns repeating from atom to cosmos. Yet beyond pattern, one more question lingers. If all is one, where does meaning arise? Meaning depends on distinction, on the capacity to say this and that. In a pure unity, there is no reference point, no contrast, no awareness. It is the split, not the whole, that allows knowing. Perhaps the universe divides itself to see itself. The many are the eyes of the one. Awareness requires separation, just enough to look back and recognize its origin. This insight carries both comfort and cost. Comfort, because it means we are never truly cut off from the source. Cost, because it implies that suffering and loss are part of the structure, not mistakes in it. The same network that connects joy also transmits pain. Unity does not guarantee kindness. It guarantees connection. The rest is left to conscious beings who can choose how to express the oneness they sense. When ancient thinkers claimed that nature itself is divine, they did not mean that trees and stones were gods. They meant that the totality is sacred, that existence requires no external blessing. To see the world as holy is to recognize that the sacred and the scientific may be the same insight viewed through different lenses. One describes order, the other worships it. Both spring from awe. To walk through a forest or to study a nebula is to stand in the same cathedral. Ultimately, the claim that all is one may be less a statement of fact than a compass for thought. It reminds us that every division we draw is provisional. The cosmos does not care about our categories. It cares only about coherence. We learn by separating things. We live by remembering their unity. The art is knowing when to apply each. The scientist dissects. The mystic dissolves. And between them lies the whole truth. So we end this chapter with a question that opens rather than closes. If the universe is one, and awareness is part of that universe, does the cosmos know itself through us? Or are we simply reflections caught in its light? The answer leads inward, toward the inner sky where the next mystery waits. We have followed the trail of beginnings, boundaries, and balance until the horizon has turned inward. The final terrain is not a region of galaxies or equations, but the interior of awareness itself. Every telescope, every particle detector, every equation begins and ends in a mind. The observer is the last mirror we have not yet examined. If the cosmos is a single whole, the mind that looks at it is not outside that whole. The question now is whether consciousness is a late product of cosmic evolution or a property woven into the fabric from the start. At first glance, the answer seems simple. Brains appeared after stars, stars after atoms, atoms after the Big Bang. Awareness is therefore an emergent phenomenon, a byproduct of matter arranged in sufficient complexity. Yet the more we study perception, the less tidy that story becomes. The laws of physics describe interactions without reference to experience, but every observation we make is saturated with it. Reality reaches us through sensation, interpretation, and imagination. There is no view from nowhere. The universe knows itself only through the narrow window of beings that can ask what knowing means. The old materialist view treated consciousness as an epiphenomenon, a flicker of static produced by neural circuits. But no equation tells us why a pattern of activity should feel like anything at all. Electrical signals can be measured, but feeling cannot. We can correlate brain states with thoughts, yet the link between matter and mind remains unexplained. Some scientists compare this gap to the divide between map and territory. A map can describe every mountain and river, but it can never contain the taste of the air or the sound of the water. The inner world belongs to a dimension that description touches but cannot replace. In plain terms, awareness is the field in which every measurement occurs. It is not a force like gravity or electromagnetism, yet nothing can be known without it. Some philosophers have proposed that consciousness is fundamental, that matter itself arises within a broader field of experience. This idea, known as panpsychism, does not claim that stones and atoms think, only that the capacity for experience is elemental, like mass or charge. If this is true, the universe has always been aware in some diffuse way, long before eyes evolved to focus its gaze. Skeptics reply that such speculation risks dissolving explanation into poetry. They prefer to treat consciousness as an emergent computation, a program running on the hardware of the brain. The program can simulate inner experience because complexity breeds self-reference. The system models itself, and that modeling feels like awareness. Yet even this description leaves a residue of mystery. Why should self-reference be accompanied by sensation? A mirror can reflect its own image without feeling pride. We return to a familiar impasse description without essence. Perhaps the divide between matter and mind is another version of the false dualities we have met before. If space and time are two aspects of a single fabric, maybe mind and matter are likewise complementary. When we look outward, the fabric presents as form, governed by law. When we look inward, it presents as meaning, guided by awareness. The two are inseparable, the outer and inner faces of one reality. This symmetry would explain why mathematics born in thought so precisely matches the behavior of nature. The cosmos and the mind share a grammar because they are written in the same language. Consider the act of discovery itself. When a scientist perceives a pattern in data, that pattern becomes part of human consciousness. The universe expresses a law through matter, and the mind mirrors it as insight. The observer and the observed complete a circuit. Without mind, the law remains mute. Without law, mind has nothing to perceive. Awareness is not an intruder in the system. It is the system becoming self-aware. We do not stand outside creation. We are its latest reflection looking back. There is a human-scale image for this. Picture a night sky, perfectly clear after rain. The stars are countless, but beneath them lies a puddle on the ground reflecting the same points of light. The reflection trembles with the faint breeze, yet it contains the pattern of the heavens. The puddle is the mind. The sky is the cosmos. The shimmer is thought. The two are continuous, one vast, one small, both real. When we study the reflection, we are in fact studying the original through the lens of ourselves. Such metaphors hint at a deeper question. If awareness is the universe's mirror, what purpose does reflection serve? Why should matter bother to become conscious? One possible answer is that knowing completes existence. A cosmos without observers would be like a book never opened. Its beauty would remain unrealized. The act of observation turns potential into experience, collapsing possibilities into histories. In this sense, consciousness is not a late accident but the final step in creation's unfolding, the universe discovering that it exists. Still, there is danger in romanticizing this idea. Awareness is not omniscience. Human perception is narrow, fallible, and brief. Our inner sky flickers with doubt as much as with revelation. The same mind that charts galaxies can wage war or retreat into despair. Consciousness gives meaning, but it also multiplies pain. To feel is to risk suffering, and yet without feeling, the cosmos would remain mute. It seems that to create awareness, the universe accepted fragility as the price of reflection. In everyday life, the cosmic and the personal meet in small moments, the hush before dawn, the first light through a window, the pause between breaths. In these moments, the boundary between inner and outer dissolves. The world outside and the awareness within align like overlapping mirrors. Such experiences remind us that we do not need distant telescopes to encounter infinity. The vastness is here. In the silence that watches thought arise and fade, the stars overhead and the neurons firing inside follow the same rhythm. Simply put, to explore the universe is to explore ourselves. Every question about origin and destiny is also a question about perception. When we ask where time began, we are really asking when awareness began to measure change. When we wonder what holds the cosmos together, we are also seeking the principle that holds attention steady amid distraction. The outer sky and the inner sky are bound by the same mystery coherence emerging from chaos, meaning arising from motion. Why does this matter? Because it suggests that understanding is participatory. Knowledge is not a cold inventory of facts, but a dialogue between being and seeing. Each discovery alters the observer, and each shift in consciousness reveals new aspects of the world. The more deeply we perceive, the more the universe discloses of itself. Awareness is the bridge across which the cosmos crosses to meet its own face. Some traditions call this realization enlightenment. Others call it insight or self-remembering. In scientific language, it could be described as the closing of a feedback loop, the system recognizing itself as part of the process it studies. Whatever the term, the experience carries humility. The stars do not need our understanding to shine, yet through understanding we share their light. The act of knowing becomes a form of participation, a way for the cosmos to articulate its existence through sentient minds. The inner sky is not bound by skull or bone. It extends wherever attention goes. When we imagine galaxies, our neurons fire in patterns that echo their spiral arms. When we feel compassion, the same chemistry that binds atoms into stars binds us to each other. Awareness and matter intertwine. Two currents of one sea. To see that is to sense continuity without collapsing difference. We are waves aware of being ocean. Perhaps this is the final layer of the story we have followed, not the origin of the universe, but the origin of wonder itself. The mind that gazes outward and the cosmos that receives its gaze are aspects of one event. Consciousness is the cosmos contemplating itself. Brief yet infinite, fragile yet luminous. The moment we recognize this, the boundary between science and spirituality fades into transparency. Investigation becomes reverence, and reverence becomes another form of inquiry. The journey through beginnings and causes ends not with a final answer, but with awareness itself standing as the ground of all questions. The fire that forged the first atom still burns behind the eyes that read these words. To understand that connection is to glimpse eternity folded into the present. The universe is not only outside us, it is within, mirrored in thought, sustained by attention. We close this act with one more image: the night sky, boundless, silent, turns slowly above. In the stillness, a mind looks up and feels something beyond measure, a quiet recognition that the stars are not remote lights but extensions of the same awareness that beholds them. The cosmos breathes through us, and for an instant, the watcher and the watched are one. And in that moment of unity, a new question stirs, reaching beyond even self-awareness, into what it means for meaning itself to endure. The voyage that began with a question about beginnings now circles back to the silence that preceded it. We have mapped light across billions of years, followed laws that may explain themselves, and looked inward to find a mirror that sees and is seen. What remains when the equations fade, when telescopes sleep, when thought grows still? The answer is not a new theory. It is an attitude, a posture before the infinite humility that listens without rushing to name. The story of the cosmos is also the story of awareness, learning to read itself. In every age, humans built instruments to extend their senses. Each improvement pushed the horizon outward, yet also turned the gaze back inward. The more we discover, the less the universe resembles a mechanism built for us. It looks instead like an unfolding field of relation, coherent without center, alive without intent. The miracle is not that we matter to it, but that it produces minds capable of asking why it exists at all. Some say the universe needs no purpose. Others insist purpose is its hidden symmetry. Between these views stands a third possibility, that meaning is not found or imposed, but generated in the meeting between mind and world. The cosmos supplies pattern, consciousness supplies interpretation, and together they create significance. When we understand this, we cease demanding that nature speak in human language. We listen instead to the rhythm beneath speech, to the mathematics of continuity that hums through all things. The philosopher's echo asks what it means to know. Knowledge once promised mastery, but now it humbles. Each discovery enlarges the circumference of ignorance. The cosmic horizon expands faster than comprehension can chase it, yet in that chase lies the beauty. To pursue what cannot be fully known is to participate in creation. We are explorers not because we expect to arrive, but because seeking itself is the universe awakening to itself through curiosity. In plain terms, the universe does not hand us meaning. It gives us material for meaning. Stars fuse hydrogen into heavier elements. From those elements come planets, oceans, and minds. Each layer adds reflection. Hydrogen dreams itself into awareness. To recognize that lineage is to treat existence with care. We are not separate spectators. We are one of the ways the cosmos measures its own temperature, describes its own geometry, and imagines its own future. The insight reshapes morality as well as metaphysics. If matter and mind are faces of one field, then ethics becomes physics at another scale. Compassion is continuity perceived emotionally. To harm the web is to reduce the coherence that made us possible. Responsibility extends beyond species or planet. It touches the entire experiment of order emerging from chaos. Our brief lives are not accidents within that order, but expressions of it, threads that add color to the pattern even as they fade. The ancient intuition that divinity and nature are one gains new form here. Divinity may not be a person beyond the stars, but the self-consistency of existence itself. The fact that something is, rather than nothing. To call that sacred is not superstition, it is gratitude. The scientist's wonder at a successful prediction and the mystic's awe before silence are gestures toward the same mystery. Both recognize coherence without claiming to own it. The more we learn, the less the universe looks like a battlefield of opposites. Light and gravity, wave and particle, expansion and collapse. All pairings find resolution in deeper unity. The same may be true of thought and feeling, science and art, reason and faith. Each is a mode of perception, incomplete alone. Together they approximate wholeness, a dialogue of ways of knowing. To live wisely is to keep that dialogue open, resisting both dogma and despair. There is a quiet lesson in the way galaxies drift apart. Expansion is not chaos. It is balance. The fabric stretches to keep energy evenly distributed. In the same way, consciousness expands through difference. Every mind adds new coordinates to reality's map. When we share insight, we extend the universe's awareness of itself. That is the hidden unity of communication. Language is starlight turned into sound. Why does this matter? Because it restores a sense of participation. The immensity that once made us feel small can instead make us feel included. To be finite inside the infinite is not a curse, but a privilege. The horizon is not the end of meaning. It is its beginning. Only limited creatures can experience wonder. Infinity itself cannot marvel. It can only be. Wonder requires a boundary to lean against. We might never find the final theory. The ultimate laws may always recede like a mirage, but perhaps the point was never to solve the universe, only to converse with it. Each measurement, each poem, each act of compassion is a form of reply. The cosmos asks through its existence. We answer through our attention. Between question and answer lies the pulse of meaning, the heartbeat of reality conscious of itself for a moment before silence resumes. At its core, the philosophical echo says this creation is not behind us or ahead of us. It is ongoing. Every breath draws in particles forged in stars and releases them to future worlds. Every thought shapes the next century of minds. The arrow of time is also the arrow of imagination. Through us, the universe rehearses possibilities it could never test otherwise. The line between fact and value, between physics and purpose, blurs until only participation remains. The path forward is not to replace mystery with certainty, but to balance them. Mystery keeps inquiry alive. Certainty keeps meaning steady. When they coexist, understanding becomes a kind of prayer, and curiosity a form of devotion. We explore not to conquer, but to belong more consciously. To live in that awareness is to see the ordinary as miraculous light in a glass of water, patterns in sand, silence between words. All our instruments, from radio antennas to introspection, are forms of listening. They extend the ear of consciousness deeper into the unknown. Each time we tune them, we hear the same faint message encoded in every frequency. The universe is coherent enough to be understood and vast enough never to be exhausted. That combination, intelligibility without completion, is the signature of a reality that invites conversation rather than closure. A poet once wrote that to understand is to stand under, to bow before what is greater. In that posture lies both science and reverence. To stand under the night sky is to feel the pull of gravity and the pull of meaning at once. Both ask the same act of humility to look up, to keep asking, to keep noticing. So the story returns to where it began, with a question that opens instead of closes. If the cosmos is awake through us, if meaning arises wherever awareness meets existence, what new form will that awareness take when we are gone? And what new eyes will one day look back across the dark and ask, as we do now, what it all means?